ProtonMail suspended journalist accounts. Plex had a data breach, leadership changes at the EFF, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 241, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past 2 weeks. We missed a week. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
Our sponsor this week is EasyOptOuts, the data removal service that is affordable at only $20 a year. They offer cancellations if you're not satisfied. Research has found them to be extremely effective. They ask for minimal information. There are no third-party contractors to share your data with. They only request removal if they find your data. They're trying to save you time in getting your data off the internet, just like they're trying to save you time with this ad read. So thanks to EasyOptOuts for the support. You guys may have noticed, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, that we are testing a little bit of a new setup here. So just a heads up, let us know what you think. It might make our editing way faster, but we still want to make sure we're delivering a high quality product to all of you.
Hey everyone, just a little quick update. Just wanted to let you all know that we've been traveling in Europe because of some events like the NextCloud conference. And so this was actually recorded last week, but fortunately for you, we also recorded an in-person episode, which will go live very soon. So you'll get double uploads this week. Enjoy this one, and we'll see you all very soon for the latest updates.
So our highlight story this week is about Proton. Proton has been accused of suspending journalist accounts at the request of a cybersecurity agency from South Korea. So this all starts with a magazine called Phrak, P-H-R-A-K, which I think I can actually click that link right there. So these alleged journalists apparently somehow got a hold of a data dump from a North Korean hacker's workstation. Like, this is an actual state North Korean hacker. They got a hold of a bunch of files from his work computer, and this article is basically them explaining what they found there and kind of going into detail. For those of you watching the video, I'm scrolling through the article here. You can see it's very technical. So the claim here is that a certain South Korean agency, most likely a CERT, but I don't think anybody has officially stated who it was, reached out to Proton and requested that these accounts get removed because there's basically some, how do I put this? There's some disagreement here over exactly who these people are. As you can see, again, if you're watching this, The Intercept calls these people journalists. And again, that article that I clicked on a minute ago does go into detail about what they found, but it doesn't say where they got the data. I think they are the first source, so it most likely came from them, which means they engaged in hacking. So are they journalists? Are they hackers? Are they hacktivists? We'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, that's basically I guess that's basically the context of the whole story is these guys got this data, they wrote up an article, and South Korea reached out to Proton and said, these guys are engaging in illegal hacking. Can you please disable their accounts? And Proton did. And apparently it took multiple weeks and the accounts were eventually reinstated. That's kind of where the facts end.
Outrage.
Yes, public outcry. That's kind of where the facts of this case end. And, normally we don't pick such short stories for a headline story, but the reason the facts end there is because now we're getting into a lot of disagreement. So like I said, one of the first things is this article says they were journalists. Proton, Andy Yen, says no, they were hacktivists. Like there's a distinct difference there. They wrote an article, but as far as I can tell, they did actually hack into this computer and steal this data firsthand. So it's not like somebody gave it to them and they were like, hey, let's talk about what's in here. They went and stole this data, which does technically make them hackers of some kind. There's also a little bit of disagreement. If I go back to that article, towards the top, there's like a timeline here. And for those of you listening, they say like on June 16th, we informed Defense Counterintelligence Command. Basically, they claim that they tried to share this data with South Korea to be like, hey, North Korea has access to your system. I guess I missed that little piece of context. They tried to share this data with South Korea to let them know like, hey, North Korea has infiltrated your system. You should probably patch this up. And apparently South Korea emailed Proton and got upset about it. So they have this little timeline here where they say, we reported this data responsibly before we published this. They say on August 15th, Proton disabled, they set a whistleblower's email account. On the 16th, Proton disabled the author's email account. They say they appealed on the 18th, the 22nd, the September 6th, September 9th, and then finally on September 10th, it was re-enabled. Andy says in his official statement that they only reached out like twice. He also didn't say when they reached out, so I'm not sure what the time window is there. He says they only reached out twice instead of, I think they said it was like 8 times they reached out. Like the authors make that claim. So there's a lot of disagreement here on exactly what happened. I think that's it for facts, because now here are my thoughts. So this is, okay, first things first, I do want to give credit where it's due. Proton used to have a threat model page that I wish they would bring back that specifically said, if you're doing something sensitive, like if you're Edward Snowden, Proton may not be the right service for you. And in fact, they would argue email is not the right service for you. Like, for those of you who don't know, For those of you who don't know who Edward Snowden is, because we're hitting that point in history, he was a whistleblower that revealed mass NSA surveillance happening all over the world. And he didn't email his information to people. He emailed people directly and then met with them in person. So they're not entirely wrong.
And I sent it in the chat.
Say again?
I sent the link in the chat.
Hey, they still have the page?
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, look at that. It still exists. Okay, that's great. Well, it's a blog post. Okay. So yeah, here, see what ProtonMail does not guard against: compromised accounts, man-in-the-middle attacks, Proton recommended use cases, sensitive business communications, anyone with privacy concerns, organizations, not recommended. Here we go. If you are attempting to leak state secrets, as was the case of Edward Snowden, or going up against a powerful state adversary, email may not be the most secure medium for communications. So they do straight up say that to their defense.
And it literally says, too, they can log your IP address. And by the way, this blog was written in 2014. So this is like well over 10 years ago that they specifically say these things.
Yeah, while we can offer more protection and security, we cannot guarantee your safety against a powerful adversary. So yeah, I just want to give credit where credit's due there. They have said this. I think to Andy's defense, so if I can go back to this Reddit post, Andy Yen wrote this big blog post on Reddit, which, side note, I really wish Proton would stop using Reddit as their official channel because fuck Reddit. He says, contrary to what some people think, Proton generally, to be fair, quote unquote, generally, only suspends a single service and not all services. For example, let's say you decided to start sending spam in violation of Proton's terms of service. ProtonMail may be suspended, but Proton Pass will continue to work. If that's true, if I do a search for Proton, it pops up a bunch here at the beginning where they explained everything that happened, blah, blah, blah. And then the only other place it pops up is where they say, here's where the data dump is available. And they list an Onion site, they list DDoS secrets, and they list Proton Drive. So if that's true, Proton Drive should have been enabled for these people, not ProtonMail. The other thing that I asked about, okay, so they said, if the violation is verified beyond a reasonable doubt, Proton will suspend the account. Proton data is encrypted, but we use OSINT techniques, our data sets of dark web chatter, information shared with us by other tech companies, and various other methods to do verification. So this was one of the questions I had initially with this story, was like, did Proton actually do any due diligence into this, or did they just go ahead and delete it without any evidence? In which case, who was the one that told them to delete these accounts? Like, was it somebody that they had a good relationship with, and so they kind of trusted them, or, and so this sounds like they did their due diligence and did research. So then if that's the case, and so I asked, let me go ahead and expand this. So I actually posted on this, and I have a Reddit account that I've never deleted, but I'm not very active on it anymore. I asked Andy to explain this a little bit better. And I said that, so I'll just read what I wrote for the audio listeners. You said in this post, if a violation is verified beyond a reasonable doubt, Proton will suspend. Proton is encrypted, but we use OSINT, blah, blah, blah. You then say, quote, in enforcing our terms of service, we show no favor or bias. It doesn't matter your ideology or which side you are on. Proton enforces the terms of service uniformly. However, then you said, quote, in this case, I made the decision to exceptionally restore 2 accounts because hacktivism cases are not always black and white. And I said, so which is it? Did they break the terms of service that you uniformly enforce, or did you give them a pass because of bad PR? If they didn't break the terms of service, why were they banned in the first place after such a thorough verification process? Why do these people get a pass and not others? And then he said, I restored the 2 accounts exceptionally because I am personally sympathetic towards them, and there is just enough gray zone to make this permissible, but a stricter interpretation applied by the team originally would be that they broke the terms of service. I really hate to say bad things about Proton, but that's really alarming because Andy has made his political leanings very clear in the past. And this tells me that if he is not sympathetic to your leanings, then you may not get your account restored. Yeah, I don't like to be political or take sides, but that's really alarming, and I don't like that. I don't like that he personally decided to unilaterally make an exception because he liked what they had to say. I think Proton is still a good service for the average person, which is really, Henry and I have always had that target audience. We've never been here trying to tell you how to become a whistleblower. We do mention some stuff for like light activism, things like attending a protest or getting involved with some kind of activist group. But we definitely shy away from trying to give advice for people in like extremely repressive countries or people who are aspiring for political office or anything like that. Like, that's not really our target audience. And I think for our target audience, ProtonMail is fine. I'm not telling my wife to get away from them. I would still wholeheartedly I've still recommended them to some of the people I've met online who are not doing anything super extreme. They are still a good service. They are still encrypted. But I do think that if you do intend to be a little bit more politically active, I think you should be a little bit more careful who you trust your data with.
Something that's misrepresented in this story that I do think needs to be cleared up. There is a very important discussion to be had here. So I'm not saying this to justify what Proton did necessarily. This is not a privacy and security discussion at all. That is not what's happening here. No one is talking, if anything, this story proves that their privacy and security is very solid because it's not like they handed over the user data. They just disabled the account. So I want to make it very clear this isn't a privacy and security discussion.
ProtonMail, like we've seen in the past, the most they did was hand over an IP address. I think once they did a recovery email, things that are not protected under their threat model, things that we
They've
know
done
about.
a little bit of metadata stuff too, like when the account was created, but yeah, never any content or.
Yeah, not your email content, which is all they really promised to do. What this
I just wanted to throw
is
that out there.
it's a discussion about censorship. It's a discussion about politics. It's about laws. It's about the legal side of these privacy services in which privacy can exist. And that is how I think more of the discussions need to be framed around this, because a lot of it online is like kind of just outrage for the sake of outrage. But I think really we need to make this discussion a little bit more of like, hey, what actually is a legal hacker? Like, how do we define what that is? In what countries are hackers protected? In which countries are they not protected? ProtonMail is a legal entity that has to respond to legal requests. I don't really blame them for being strict about that, and they don't want to create liability for themselves. If someone is like hacking into North Korea and someone says, hey, these people hacked into North Korea, they're hackers, we need you to disable their accounts, I wouldn't immediately go, can you please share more information with me so that I can like verify that they are in fact, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of a tricky spot that they're in. So they're bound by laws. I think there needs to be better definition of hackers versus hacktivists versus activists. And I also think that Proton can just have better communication across all of this. I think they could have just said, hey, we apply very strict terms of service policies. We don't want to like create any legal issues for any of our users or ourselves. And we just applied this to be too strict. And we made an exception in this case because now we have more details we didn't otherwise have. But normally we would, I don't know. Why is that so hard? I mean, I get a blog article for everything from them nowadays. Like
several times a day sometimes.
How to wipe your desk.
Privately.
Yeah. Anyway, those are kind of my thoughts. I just want the discussion to be framed less about the privacy and security, because this has nothing to do with that, and more about like the politics and the laws. And when people say laws don't do anything, this is where laws do something. Like, all the services we talk about and use have to exist within a legal system. So when people say laws don't matter, I really fight back on that, because laws will either allow the tools that we like and recommend to flourish and allow them to give you better privacy, or it makes them demonize, it makes them illegal to use, and it makes it harder for you to access those tools. Laws matter, and it is a part of this discussion.
Yeah, like you were saying, the reason we're sharing this story is because Proton is kind of like the Apple of the privacy world, both good and bad, in my opinion. And so they're a big name. And so when stories like this come up, it's like you said, it's not so much the privacy and security aspect, it's more the being aware that these things happen.
Try to be nuanced about it. You know, it doesn't have to be this side or that side, which is how a lot of these things are portrayed. I like, my personal thoughts on this are that communication could have been better. Maybe them. I think a great use of this incident is to come forward and have, you know, they have this awesome threat model page from 2014. I think it'd be awesome to like maybe detail what they consider to be acceptable, like journalist and protest, counterculture use cases for ProtonMail, right? Like, I think that would actually be a really cool proactive thing for them to do, so that people understand like, oh, what is considered fair use and what is not considered fair use when you're using the platform. And I also think that the privacy and security still being attacked is awesome. It speaks to how Proton still does overall what they're supposed to do. And I also think that, like, if I was a journalist, I'd be like looking at the story going, what the hell? Am I going to get my Proton account shut down next week? Yeah. So I think all those things are true. And I totally get why, especially if I was a journalist, I'd be like, this is concerning. But also, I don't know where else you'd really go if I was a journalist. Like, you're going to have these issues far more quickly, probably, with Google. This is all jurisdiction stuff, right? Like, if you're an American journalist in the US and you're covering Russia, you probably don't have to worry about Google. There's a lot of weird global politics that goes into these stories. So try to appreciate that as much as you guys can in the comments, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Plex has suffered a data breach. Plex is the media player, kind of maybe in our community. Everyone, if you know what Jellyfin is, you know what Plex is most likely, but it is kind of like Jellyfin. So they had a data breach. They alerted their customers about this. It included exposed emails, usernames, and hashed passwords. They did say that it was encrypted following best practices, so the attackers can't simply read the passwords, which is a step in the right direction. And there was no credit card payment information that was stored on this either. They still are encouraging everybody to reset their passwords, which we would recommend as well, especially if you're reusing that password somewhere else. So as always, make sure you're using a password manager, and or just making sure you're using random, unique, strong passwords across different services.
Next up, venture capital firm Insight Partners says thousands of staff and limited partners had personal data stolen in a ransomware attack. So this attack occurred in mid-October of 2024. and they just recently completed their investigation. If only they were so thorough with their security. They said it impacted more than 1,200 people in Maine. That's the Maine Attorney General. So I'm still unclear if that means it only impacted people in Maine or if that's just the whole data breach. Not sure. Neither of the notification letters disclosed what specific data was taken. But according to an earlier statement, it could include information about funds, management companies, portfolios, as well as banking and tax information, personal data about current and former employees, and certain partners, typically private and unnamed investors who help provide capital. My takeaway with stories like these is always just to remember what information you're turning over when you work for an employer. You kind of have to turn over, especially if you're in a traditional W-2 job here in America. You do have to turn over certain real information because, they have to report taxes and stuff. But I'm a big fan of giving them a mailing address, like a P.O. box instead of a real address. Using a voice over IP phone number always frees your credit. That should be pretty standard no matter what your job is, stuff like that.
Jaguar Land Rover has confirmed a data theft. So, long story short here, they were suffering a cyber attack that shut down a ton of their activities, and it disrupted things with the auto manufacturer. And this is just confirmation that they also stole data as part of that. So they stole information from its compromised systems. The company has yet to attribute the attack to a specific cybercrime group, and no known ransomware gangs have taken responsibility for the attack. They did say, though, that a loosely knit group of cybercriminals calling themselves Scattered Lapsus Hunters has claimed responsibility on Telegram, sharing screenshots of this internal thing. So it seems like those are most likely the people doing this, but it's hard to know in this little economy of the dark market for data. We don't really have much more information on what exactly was stolen from this story. So we'll keep you guys updated if they start talking.
The Panama Ministry of Economy discloses a breach claimed by the INC ransomware gang. Yeah, Panama's MEF is an important ministry in the country, managing fiscal policy, public spending, and debt management. Most importantly, it handles the Panama Canal revenues, the country's largest source of income. So the MEF says that personal and institutional data are safe and all industry standard measures are in place to prevent future incidents. Industry standard is never a reassuring phrase to me because I know that the industry standard is pretty low. However, the ransomware gang has claimed that they stole more than 1.5 terabytes of data, including emails, financial documents, budgeting details, and more. The article didn't really go into detail of what "and more" means, so maybe personal details, maybe just company stuff, not entirely sure. So Bleeping Computer contacted MEF to ask about the validity, but has not received a response by publication time. Veteran viewers will know that usually when we have these stories where they say, oh no, there was no data breach, 99 out of 100 times there was a data breach. There's only been 2 times we've covered that there actually wasn't. So if I was a betting man, I'd say there was probably a data breach.
Next story is from FinWise, and this impacts almost 900,000 American First Finance customers. This is a bank, and the warning was issued on behalf of corporate customers. Now, the really important thing I want to draw attention to is when this happened. So, this is news from the last couple of weeks, but on May 31st, 2024, FinWise experienced a data security incident involving a former employee who accessed their data after the end of their employment. It did include customer information, including full names and other personal data elements, which they don't fully disclose what that means. Now, they did say they strengthened their internal controls. They contacted to learn more, and the FinWise spokesperson said they do not have a comment on the ongoing litigation. They're now facing multiple class action lawsuits related to the data breach, and I'm sure that this also destroys a bit of their reputation, especially in the banking world. So just something to keep in mind. This stuff is important, especially if you run a business, if you are trying to make sure that you maintain that kind of reputation, you want to make sure you treat data sensitively. And if you are in any way involved with this bank, I don't know if they're going to notify you very well what happened. So I would just be a bit more proactive if you in any way are in any way related to this company. As far as you know. So just try to track down that data and see if you're involved, and then take the proper mitigations like using alias information, freezing your credit. It should be something you would have already done, and anything else that you can do to help protect yourself.
Kering, which is the parent company of several luxury brands, has confirmed a hack. So this affects data from companies like Gucci, I'm not a luxury person, so I'm going to screw this up. I apologize. Balenciaga, Alexander McQueen, Yves Saint Laurent, I don't care, and others on Monday. So this includes personal information of customers, including names, email addresses, phone numbers, home addresses, and the total amount of money customers had spent in stores around the world. And Kering did not say how many individuals were impacted, but databreaches.net estimates the number to be at least 7 million. So yeah, we always recommend, whenever possible, aliasing information, alias email address, alias phone numbers, PO boxes, and I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to create accounts and get rewards points because those things can help save money, but keep in mind that you are creating data for them to use against you or potentially leak. And I don't know, man, these are expensive brands that if it's stores around the world and somebody knows that you've spent $1 million on Gucci stuff around the world, you sound like a pretty valuable target to me. So not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying these are things to keep in mind.
This is not so much a data breach, but there's not a better category for it. So there's a DHS data hub that exposed sensitive intel to thousands of unauthorized users. So this is more of like a potential for harm, potential for someone getting access to something they shouldn't have. The long story short here is that there was a Freedom of Information Act request that shared with Wired that from March to May of 2023, there's a DHS online platform used by the DHS Office of Intelligence and Analysis to share sensitive but unclassified intelligence information and investigative leads among the DHS, the FBI, and the National Counterterrorism Center. The problem is that this was also accessible to people that shouldn't have access to it, including some international people, third-party contractors, and let's see, they say, and they even have records of when those were accessed in an unauthorized fashion. So they pretty much counted 518 were private sector users and another 46 were non-US citizens. The instances of foreign user access were almost entirely focused on cybersecurity information. And 39% of all the improperly accessed intelligence products involved cybersecurity, like foreign state-sponsored hacker groups and foreign targeting of government IT systems. The memo also noted that some of the unauthorized U.S. users who viewed the information would have been eligible to have accessed the restricted information if they'd asked to be considered for authorization. So they did fix this problem and they investigated any potential harm. There was no impact for serious security breach. But I think for me, one of the big takeaways from this, it sounds like this wasn't a huge story in itself. But it's a reminder that we don't spy on U.S. citizens, we don't spy on non-criminals, whatever the justification is for mass surveillance that's done on a nationwide level, even if we fully trust the surveillance, right? Like I'm using that as an assumption. I'm using it as an assumption that the technology works, it only catches bad people, it's only used in an honest way. All of the arguments that we hear, even in those situations, they cannot stop or control a situation where someone has unauthorized access to that sensitive data. If a hacker breaks into their systems, the hacker has access to that information. If your government is hacked by another government, that government now has that information. If they do a data sharing agreement with a new government, now, that new government has your information as well. So my point is, turnkey politics is something you always have to keep in mind, and the likelihood of a third party getting that same data. So you should always just treat this as a values thing instead of a, like, who do I want to have my data? It should be a, who is actually protecting my data because they're not collecting it. So treat this from a values perspective instead of a partisan, like, who do I want to have my data perspective.
And our last data breach this week, Shiny Hunters claims 1.5 billion Salesforce records stolen in Drift hacks. So I believe this is a combination of some of the different stories we've been covering. For those just joining us, Salesforce is this online platform, and Drift specifically is like their AI chatbot or something or other, something like that. The Shiny Hunters extortion group basically made a supply chain attack where they were able to not attack Salesforce directly, I don't think, but they were able to kind of insert themselves. It just had this cascading effect. We see this a couple times a year, unfortunately, kind of becoming numb to it. But yeah, they said they've been able to impact over 760 companies, and they've stolen over 1.5 billion records. To be clear, a record is an individual piece of data. So it could be, for example, if you steal name, date of birth, email address, and we'll say like phone number from one person, that would be 4 records. So it's not necessarily 1.5 billion people, but even so, that's a lot of data. And even if there is a lot of overlap between different people, that's almost kind of worse because the more data you have, the more you can easily pinpoint that you're targeting the right person. And this is data that could, depending on what it is, it could be used to log into their accounts, it could be credentials, or it could be used to create convincing phishing emails and target them a little bit better. So
this is company news, and this next story is very interesting, and I really like this story, and it's a bit technical, so I am going to do a bit more quoting from the article, but it's Apple's big bet to eliminate the iPhone's most targeted vulnerabilities. And they say iPhones, but honestly, it's a pretty broad series of attacks that is an issue in all operating systems. With memory unsafe programming languages underlying so much of the world's collective code base. So a lot of people like some newer programming languages out there right now because they're memory safe, which means they're a bit harder to exploit via memory-based attacks. And so lots of things like C and C++ are not memory safe programming languages that still underlie a lot of the things that we use. This is a non-technical person's explanation to a non-technical person. So they actually did develop some things to actually improve the memory safety of these older, less up-to-date, less secure programming languages in terms of memory. And so this was started by ARM. They released MTE, which is memory tagging extension. And this is a tool to help developers find and fix memory corruption bugs. If the system receives a memory access request without passing the secret check, the app will crash and the system will log the sequence of events for developers to review. Apple engineers wondered whether MTE could run all the time rather than just being used as a debugging tool. And the group worked with ARM to release a version of that spec for this purpose in 2022. Really interesting idea. Now, they actually have just made this a constant real-time defense on all their new iPhones. So they actually integrated this within their chips. So this is on all the time. It doesn't sacrifice performance or processor capacity. This memory integrity enforcement is now built into the Apple hardware and software in all of their new iPhone models, including the iPhone Air and both of the iPhone 17 models. They also released a version of the enhanced memory tagging extension specification for all Apple developers in Xcode, so that if you're an app maker, you can actually incorporate this protection into your products. So yeah, if any of you build apps, that's something to definitely look into to see if you can keep your users a bit safer. Yeah, pretty much the article finishes this off by saying that Apple's been criticized for their walled garden approach, including lack of transparency, etc. But there can sometimes be benefits to their walled garden approach, which is something that I think is a valid thing to say. I think there have been very specific situations where Apple has been able to say, yeah, we can do this because we have our walled garden approach. And the article, Wired, and myself, maybe Nate disagrees, this is a situation where that's true. And this seems like a very tough thing to do to actually roll it out across, this is bottom to top. This is hardware through software. There's very few companies that can do this first. So hopefully, this will put pressure on other companies, and maybe we'll see this in Pixels coming soon because it's pretty cool tech and it's going to keep you all a bit more secure out there.
Next up, on the topic of phones and making them more secure, Google wants to make Android phones safer by switching to risk-based security updates. So a little bit of background here. Basically, for the past decade, Google has consistently published an Android security bulletin every month, even if the company wasn't ready to roll out security updates to its own Pixel devices. These bulletins detail vulnerabilities that have been fixed in that month's security releases, with issues ranging from low to critical. They talk about how when the company becomes aware of a vulnerability, needless to say, they don't publish it immediately because that will just make it easier for attackers to find it and start exploiting it. So instead, usually they have, again, these Android security bulletins. So there's basically, according to this article, there's like a public version and a private one. And the private one gets sent out in advance to the certain OEMs that Google works with and chipset vendors as well, about 30 days in advance, according to this article. And then after about 30 days, it's publicly released. All right, so moving forward, Google is now going to prioritize shipping only high-risk vulnerabilities in monthly releases. And the majority of security fixes will be shipped in the quarterly ASBs. Google defines high-risk vulnerabilities as issues that are crucial to address immediately, such as those under active exploitation or that are part of a known exploit chain. This designation is based on real-world threat level and is distinct from a vulnerability's critical or high severity rating. So basically what they're hoping is that, according to this article, they're hoping that this will make those lower-end devices we just talked about, it will make it easier for them to stay up to date. OEMs will have fewer patches to merge, test, and ship each month. This reduces the difficulty of shipping monthly updates and may result in some OEMs shipping them more frequently. And OEMs will have more flexibility in deciding how quickly they want to release security updates. Most can focus their efforts on larger quarterly releases, while others can optionally update monthly to meet specific compliance targets. So apparently Google hasn't publicly announced this shift in strategy, but Android Authority has spoken to multiple sources who confirm the change. For most users, this approach won't change much. If you already receive monthly security updates, you'll continue to get them. If you don't, this change may help your device's manufacturer deliver them more consistently. At the very least, it should make it easier for OEMs to push out the quarterly updates, which are now far more impactful. Another downside is that Google is no longer releasing the source code for monthly security updates, only for quarterly ones. So this, in conjunction with other delays in code, with source code means that most custom ROMs can't ship monthly updates anymore. Add this to the pile of other things making it harder to mod your Android phone in 2025. So I am glad they called that out. Man, we actually could have made those headline stories too. Apple and Google doing this stuff.
Right. I might take the next couple because I don't have much to say on this. Google's released something called Velt Gemma, which is its first privacy-preserving LLM, large language model.
I think it's Vault.
Did I say that?
If not, you said it kind of weird.
Vault Gemma.
I digress.
So pretty much, instead of just taking training data, using the data to train an LLM, they're now adding differential privacy to that process, which essentially is just going to add randomized noise to the training data, or at least to the size of the original training data. It's introducing calibrated noise during the training phase. So they still... It's so funny because they literally are saying in the paper, they don't actually quite know what impacts this will have, but it is better for privacy. So that is the constant here. But they're like, yeah, we don't know if it'll scale. We don't know what the performance will be like. It doesn't really control how the output will be, if it's more accurate, etc. It seems like just a lot of mysteries, but there is a paper here that they detail the scaling laws of large language models, and it involves differential privacy language models. So this is well beyond my pay grade. I can't tell you anything about this, but if you are somebody who understands this stuff, this could be maybe an interesting PDF to go through. I don't know why Google is so interested in a privacy-preserving LLM, but this isn't a bad thing. So I guess we'll see where this goes. I'm just a bit hesitant to say that this will actually impact the privacy of any Google services in the future.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And then also, pretty quick story from Google here. They've partnered with a UK nonprofit to detect and remove non-consensual intimate images from search. So this is Stop NCII system, and it's a partnership with and this is a year after Microsoft also integrated them into Bing. And, what this does is it takes hashes from images. So it's not actually analyzing each image. It's just each image has a unique hash that goes along with it, and it analyzes those hashes. And then it just makes sure that it doesn't align with whatever database or tools they have to check for CSAM and anything else that's not good on the internet.
So yeah, I don't think this article discussed how they intend to process these IDs. I don't know if that's because ChatGPT hasn't said anything, or if just maybe that's not the focus of this particular article. That's definitely a concern, as with any sort of age verification, is who's processing these IDs, how are they storing them, what's the data safety, which Henry and I have already come out against this type of age verification for the record, but still, that is, putting that argument aside, that's always the first question is like, how are you going to roll this out? I also want to point out, as I was scrolling this article, in August, the Wall Street Journal also reported a story about a 56-year-old man who committed murder-suicide after ChatGPT indulged his paranoia. So yeah, age gating is clearly going to fix this problem, which I think is more the angle that 404 was taking here is, where did it go? I saw it a minute ago. Well, I can't find it now, but and maybe I'm putting words in their mouth, but I think I saw a section when I was skimming through where they said something about basically like, this is, oh yeah, right here. OpenAI's post explains that it is struggling to manage an inherent problem with large language models that 404 Media has tracked for several years. So this is, this is the same as age gating anything else on the internet. Like, this is just part of the internet, and we always got to give the caveat. We're not saying to just let the bad parts of the internet go unchecked and rampant, but there is a point where you have to acknowledge, like, this is not something that you can easily solve with just a quick, lazy, enter your credit card and now I know you're 18. If you're using ChatGPT, we do discourage that. We think there are more privacy respecting options, Duck AI, Leo, Lumo, on-device stuff like Jan AI, GPT for all. And then just remember that it's just a yes and machine. It's not actually engaging with you. You have to double check and fact check it, and it will do anything to keep you engaging with the platform. So be mindful of it.
This one was pretty interesting. So Meta is accused of bypassing Apple's tracking rules. This comes from a former Meta employee who made these accusations, and they use it to inflate their ad metrics. I want just a very big side note. I don't believe any metrics that come out of Facebook or Meta. I just don't. I don't.
That's probably safe.
Think they are a company that's like willing to like invent users, use AI. Like, I think they'll do anything to inflate and fake their numbers. So I fully believe this just based on that. But anyway, the actual accusations, it's part of this employment trial that's going on in London because this is a whole unfolding thing. So there's a former product manager on Meta's Shop Ads team who alleged in a legal filing that they use a technique called deterministic matching, which tracks users across its platforms, potentially even when they denied tracking permission using Apple's app tracking transparency feature, which is that thing Apple rolled out that's like, do you want to be tracked? Do you say yes or no? Most people say no, which was widely a success for the most part. But in his complaint, he claims that Meta combined internal data from platforms like Facebook and Instagram to match user identities and behavior, bypassing ATT. And they inflated the reported performance of its shops ads by including taxes and shipping in the reported conversion value, allegedly boosting return on ad spend by up to 19%. Meta used $160 million in internal subsidies to promote the ad product and make it appear more successful than it was. And this also reminds me of things like Twitter and all these platforms now. They've like totally changed very subtle ways about how they report their metrics to make them look a lot higher than they really are. A good example of this on Twitter, if you do like a live stream on Twitter and you see views, those aren't actual live views. Those aren't people who are tuning in. That's just anybody who happened to scroll across it, who clicked on it and then left. So good example of how like these companies do this kind of stuff. Let's see. Now, MISC does some research on especially iOS stuff, very iOS heavy. And they discovered that Instagram is testing a new notification system that will allow the app to collect even more information on your device without you ever opening it. These allegations seem to bolster MISC's previous claims that Meta already uses push notifications to report back details about your device, like battery level, time zone, CPU, which let it fingerprint your device and track you across your apps. This is precisely what Apple introduced ATT to prevent, but it appears as though Apple's controls cannot or will not prevent determined apps from collecting device-level information. So this is nothing new. Even when ATT came out, we already had our podcast going. We got to talk about this when it was live and big and hot and new. It's a step in a fantastic direction. I still don't know if Google does anything like this, and I wish they did for Android. But most apps that aren't out there to just completely be a demon in your life should respect this. And this actually does improve a lot of people's privacy. Facebook is not one of those companies. Facebook will do everything imaginable to bypass every loophole, utilize every loophole. They're going to break every rule, break every law. They're going to do everything they can for profit. Terrible company. Hate Facebook. And this is a good reminder, and we say this all the time, keep things in the web when you can. If you have to use a Meta product for whatever reason, if you have to use Instagram, if you have to use Facebook, it's not going to stop everything. They're going to find some weird loopholes and weird workarounds to still track you on your phone. But if it's in the web, in your browser, add it to your desktop and delete the actual app. It's going to make it 10 times harder for them to do anything. In fact, they might not be able to do anything of any significance. So please, if this is a good takeaway, if this is a good takeaway for all of you, to just stop installing the Facebook programs on your device. And this includes WhatsApp as well, by the way. WhatsApp is a Meta product. The recommendations they put in the article: enable app, the app blocking thing, allow apps to request to track, turn it off. It's a bit weird how they present that, but it's off that you want. Turn off push notifications on apps that you don't trust. Those apparently can be used to track you if you are Facebook. And then, yes, they also say use a web app in a privacy-first browser. Yeah.
This next story is actually really quick. It just says Amazon violated online shopper protection law. Judge rules ahead of Prime sign-up trial. I don't know why a judge is ruling ahead of the trial, but apparently on Wednesday, a judge ruled that Amazon violated consumer protection law by gathering Prime subscribers' billing information before disclosing the service's terms. That's kind of really all the article says. It doesn't go into detail. It also does call out their dark patterns is what it's called. Like, where did they say? The FTC is poised to argue that the online retailer signed up tens of millions of customers for Prime without their consent and thwarted tens of millions of cancellation bids through complex cancellation methods, which, here's a fun thing. Even if you like Amazon, try to delete your Amazon account and watch how insanely difficult it is. It took me a week and 3 emails to a human being to do it. And for the record, I didn't have to go find the emails. That was the only easy part. But like, I went to go cancel and I'm like, delete my account. And they're like, we'll contact you. And then a day later, I got an email from like, hey, this is so-and-so. Are you sure you want to delete your account? And I'm like, yes, I am. And then I got another email, if I'm remembering correctly, this is like 10 years ago, that's like, are you sure? Like, please reply with the word confirm. And I'm like, confirm, delete the damn account, dude. So I'm actually at the point now where every time I need to buy something, I just make a new account and then I just let it rot when I'm done. So yeah, Amazon's ridiculous. And I don't want to be overly political, but I just do have to point out that the FTC, or maybe not the FTC, but the current administration or the current ruling political party in the US killed a law or a bill that was in Congress to ban dark patterns. So I think it's kind of funny that they killed that and now they're trying to crack down on it. You had your opportunity to do it, and I'll stop there because I have theories on why they did it that way, but that's beside the point. So yeah, we could have solved this already, but I guess you guys want to do it this way instead. This is a quick update. Facebook settlement payments are going out. Well, here's what to expect. We're finally seeing money from the 2016 Cambridge Analytica scandal. It'll probably be like 13 cents or something, not worth the check that they're printing it on. Yeah, it's a $725 million settlement. $22 million of that is probably going to the lawyers, and the rest of that is going to be split up against 87 million Facebook users, I guess. Yeah. No, seriously, for those just joining us, this started in 2016. The allegation is there was a company called Cambridge Analytica who rebranded as something else now because of this scandal. And they basically abused Facebook's data practices to gather up private user data on people who weren't consenting and use that for political advertising to help influence campaigns. They were active here in the US. They were active in Brexit. I believe they did some stuff in Africa as well. This settlement is now gone through, and allegedly people will start getting payments. But again, I wouldn't expect a lot of money. So, yeah, I guess that's just an update. That's really all I got.
Okay, so this next article opens up our research category, and it comes from the EFF, and it's about Ray Hunter, what we have found so far. So we covered this. And it's crazy. It's been over a year since we covered this because it feels like it just happened. But they released something called Ray Hunter, which is an open source tool that it detects cell site simulators. And pretty much you can install this. You can set this up. You can go out and about. You can just drive around your city and it'll actually detect if your cell towers that you're connecting to are legitimate. So what's very common is police, law enforcement, government agencies, etc. They can build and they allow you to connect to these fake cell towers that their whole design is to collect all your data and start learning things about you. So they pretty much made this open source, let it run out in the wild. And here are the results. First off, this is very interesting. Ray Hunter has not turned up any evidence of cell site simulators being used to spy on protests in the US. Now, there are some caveats. First, it's often impossible to prove a negative. So maybe Ray Hunter just hasn't been at protests where CSS has been present. Also, their detection signatures maybe aren't picking up techniques used by law enforcement. But again, that just means they haven't really proved that it happens, but it still could be happening via other means. Now, in favor of them actually not happening, some courts have required a warrant for their use, and even law enforcement agencies not bound by these rulings have policies that require police to get a warrant. CSS are also costly to buy and use, requiring trained personnel to use nearly $1 million worth of equipment. So the EFF does say they feel pretty good about Ray Hunter, though there could still be things they're missing. Some of their confidence in Ray Hunter's detection engine comes from the research they have done into how CSS works, but the majority of their confidence comes from testing Ray Hunter against a commercial cell site simulator thanks to their friends at Cape. Ray Hunter detected every attack run by the commercial CSS. So with that said, they have detected likely surveillance. So they have found potential evidence of this being used in the wild, though not at protests. One of the most interesting examples that triggered multiple detections and even inspired us to write some detection rules was at a cruise port in the Turks and Caicos?
Not sure.
The person who captured this data put the packet captures online for other researchers to review. They also found these in Chicago and New York, where an IMSI sent without authentication signature was triggered multiple times over the course of a couple of hours. They also received other reports that have triggered detection signatures, but the above examples are the ones they felt most confident about. They still encourage all of you to still use Ray Hunter and continue bringing it to protests because law enforcement trends can change over time, and it's possible that cities are using them more often than others. So in a place called Fontana, California, they've used CSS over 300 times in the last 2 years. They also know that ICE uses it, and they recently renewed their contracts for it. So it's still something that if you're interested in, you know how to run this, and you're able to contribute to this cause, check out Ray Hunter. And if you're not technical enough and you don't like this, consider supporting the EFF. And if you can't support the EFF, at least appreciate the story and know that it seems like protests are an unlikely place where this is happening as of right now, but that doesn't mean that these still aren't used everywhere prolifically. So somewhat of a positive story, actually, at least by my definition.
I just have 2 quick things to add. I'm going to hijack your screen here as soon as my computer lets me. So first of all, if you guys want to know more about Ray Hunter, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons on September 1st did an episode called Meet Ray Hunter, where he talked to, I believe, the developers who came up with it. Like, I think, if I remember correctly, these two came up with the Ray Hunter and approached EFF, or maybe EFF approached them. But either way, they're very, 3 of them, sorry. Cooper Quinton, the Gibson, and Oops Bagel. I love it when he interviews people that just go by their handle. It's so funny. Anyways, yeah, so that's a good episode to check out to learn more. And the other thing I wanted to add is, so I was cursed to attend the most recent South by Southwest for reasons, privacy-related reasons. I know that sounds weird, but while I was there, I met some really cool people, connected with them on Mastodon. One of them lives in Austin, and he posted on Mastodon shortly after the Ray Hunter came out. He bought one, he installed it. He's very techie, very tech-savvy guy. And he mentioned that his pinged several times, I want to say like 3 or 4 times, just driving around Austin on any normal day. So like EFF said in the article, they don't have, first of all, you can't prove a negative. It's possible that maybe they're using a law enforcement is using a newer model that we're not aware of or something. But at very least, his Ray Hunter seems to indicate that they're just randomly being used. And I mean, to be fair, I don't think he followed up on them. So I don't know if those are cops. I don't know if those are private companies. I don't know if that's somebody in their basement that like made their own Stingray and it's not an official version. But the point is, unfortunately, this does seem to be something worth keeping an eye on. So I think the defense, I don't know if Henry said this, you can cut it if you did, but the defense against things like Ray Hunters is VPNs on your phone or Orbot or encrypted messaging, and especially on newer phones, pretty much anything except a Samsung. If you check your settings, you should be able to disable downgrade to 2G or something, which if you're in an area with like a developing country or an area with bad infrastructure, first of all, thank you for listening. But in those cases, you might not want to disable that because that might actually cause you some functionality issues. But for most people in like Western and developed nations, you can disable that safely and you won't have any issues. And that will help protect you against stingrays.
Yeah, and if you use lockdown mode on iOS, it actually doesn't even let you turn on that feature. Like lockdown mode, by requirement, forces 2G to be off on your iOS device.
And I think on most newer devices, 2G is off by default, but I could be wrong about that. Still worth taking a look to check. It only takes 5 seconds. With that, we'll go into our second and last research story. This one's real quick. It says a third of UK firms using Bossware to monitor workers' activity, survey reveals. So this is really unfortunate. I've complained at my day job that they've added AI cameras to the vans, and I don't like it at all. So it's just kind of a growing trend to be aware of. We always preach compartmentalization where possible. And personally, I don't like this from a not even privacy related. To me, this just shows a lack of trust in your employees. And it shows a really adversarial relationship, which for the record, I'm under no delusions. Any company that says we're a family that's kind of a red flag. But at the same time, there is a way to have a relationship with your employees where they are empowered to make decisions and take initiative and know that unless they seriously screw up, you have their back and, all that kind of stuff. And to me, this Bossware is just, for those who don't know, I guess I should explain. Bossware is basically any surveillance software that a company puts on your company devices in the name of, safety, security, monitoring productivity, whatever. It just creates a really adversarial relationship, so I don't like them. Yeah, and it says, so private companies are most likely to deploy in-work surveillance. 1 in 7 employers are recording or reviewing screen activity. These responses are based on hundreds of UK managers, so to be fair, relatively small sample size, but it's still something. And it says this suggests there has been a recent growth in computerized work surveillance. So yeah, this does seem to be on the rise. Like I said, it really took off during COVID, I think. And somebody said it here. Do they not trust their employees to do their jobs? And are they looking to replace them with AI? So yeah, this is really adversarial and not cool. But just anyways, I guess the takeaway here, be aware that anything you do on a company device is potentially being monitored. Even if they say they don't use it, a lot of the time they have the company cybersecurity software that's still capable of telling a lot about what you're doing on the device. So just assume everything's being watched. All right, since that was a short story, I will take the next story, which will also bring us into the politics section. So ICE unit signs a new $3 million contract for phone hacking tech. And I believe we briefly talked about this last week. Is this the actual... So, well, we talked about something similar according to this article. So we talked last week about how there's a company called Paragon. They had a contract, I believe, that was signed under the first Trump administration, but don't quote me. Biden didn't kill it if it was signed under the first Trump. Biden didn't kill the contract, but also didn't move forward with it. And now that Trump's back in office, it was about to expire, but then at the last minute, the government said, no, wait, we're going to move forward with this. So it didn't expire. And yeah, that's where we're at now, is the U.S. government is investing in a lot of phone forensic surveillance tools, including zero-click malware such as Predator. And the newest one seems to be Graykey, which I believe is like a competitor to Celebrite. A lot of you probably know that one. The government has this opens database where they list all of their upcoming purchases for transparency reasons. And they say that they got software licenses for phone hacking tech to recover digital evidence, process multiple devices, and generate forensic reports essential to mission of protecting national security in public. The contract doesn't mention the name of the product, but it's likely referring to Graykey. I'm not sure where they got that information from, but I'm assuming these journalists know more than I do, especially Lorenzo, I'm going to screw this name up, Franceschi Bicchieri? Anyways, yeah, he's really good. He does a lot of great reporting. So yeah, it also shows they've signed several other contracts with Magnet Forensics and Pan America Computers, such as a platform that collects, processes, organizes, and analyzes data and evidence. Graykey Premier, which has licenses for iOS and Android extraction of electronic devices for law enforcement investigations, software licenses for Graykey, like we just said, and another $12,000 contract for unspecified magnet forensics software licenses on August 18th. So this is in addition to all of ICE's other tools like Clearview AI, we mentioned Paragon, data analytics software from Palantir, and more. So yeah, regardless of who's in power, regardless of what department this is, these are all technologies that we have been very outspoken against. We do not like them. A lot of them are very shady in origin to begin with. For example, a lot of these zero-click malwares like Predator and Pegasus, a lot of them are built using cyber criminals will go find these 0 days, and instead of responsibly reporting them to the company, they make 10 times as much money by selling it to one of these companies. And then these companies turn around and work in repressive countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, China, maybe not China, but, very authoritarian countries. And then on top of that, Clearview AI, they made their entire database by scraping every picture on the internet, like Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. So these are companies that we really don't think are operating ethically. They are a violation of privacy, and in a lot of cases, they are used to get around legal due process. Legally, law enforcement would have to go get a warrant and request this data, but a lot of the time they get a contract for this company, and now all of a sudden they have access to the data because they didn't collect the data, they being the government, but this third-party company did, and they're just buying access. So it's a whole loophole. The government tried to close it one time. It didn't go through, of course. So, yeah, not a fan of this regardless who's in power or which department is using it.
A lot of states right now are trying to pass age verification laws, as we're well aware and we've been talking about each week. It's spreading globally, but especially in U.S. states. Mississippi was one of them, and Blue Sky, the Twitter/Mastodon alternative, just pulled out because they were now being required to age verify people, and they said they couldn't do it and obey their laws. However, in South Dakota and Wyoming, it's a bit more lenient, and they are actually going to allow access to the service with some caveats. You pretty much are going to have the option to verify with payment cards, an identity document, an anonymous face scan, or other alternatives. It's a bit unclear if you can pick that, if it's more than one, if they decide based on the likelihood that they need. I don't know, right? Like, I don't have that much information, but then they do go after and say Mississippi is being ridiculous. We can't really comply with it. It's overly broad. It's poorly written. And they pretty much say, I guess that just means Facebook and Meta is going to dominate in Mississippi. Luck to you people in Mississippi. With your Meta overlords. But it is cool. I mean, it's not cool because South Dakota and Wyoming still passed these very strict age verification laws that's going to jeopardize people's privacy and security in many key ways. But at least it's not quite as bad so that Blue Sky and other services can even bother to still exist there. Yeah, this is happening all around the world. I made a video on Techlore talking about this and age verification in general and how this is a very difficult thing to navigate and why it's bad, why you should keep tabs on it. All that good stuff. That's all I have on that story. And then in San Francisco, they got an invasive billionaire bot surveillance HQ. So this is Chris Larson, who has wielded his wallet to keep city residents under the eye of the all-seeing police surveillance. The deal also includes an over $7 million gift from the San Francisco Police Community Foundation that Larson created. Police foundations are semi-public fundraising arms of police departments that allow them to buy technology and gear that the city will not give them money for. The story here in the article gives a bit of context. They pretty much say that in LA, the city's police foundation got over almost 200 grand from the company Target to pay for data analytics company Palantir to use for predictive policing. In Atlanta, the city's police foundation funds a massive surveillance apparatus, as well as the much maligned Cop City training complex. So they're pretty much saying that this is looking a lot like those things, but in San Francisco. And it's, it brings those same concerns. It's an unaccountable and untransparent fundraising arm schnoozing, as they say it in the article, with corporations and billionaires that would fund unpopular surveillance measures without having to reveal much to the public. So we're going to see where this goes. The article has a lot more context here if you want to look a little bit more into this. But the TLDR here is there's a lot more private money that's being injected into public good. And that's just a broad pattern in the US right now. And I think that comes with a lot of implications, whether or not you're like free market or pro-government, whatever approaches you want to take to this kind of situation. I think it's important to recognize that private money going into things that are meant for the public without much transparency has a lot of implications that kind of don't make everything great. So this is one of those examples. We don't know what's going to happen yet, but I am definitely concerned to see this.
All right, this next story is probably pretty quick. Court rejects Verizon claim that selling location data without consent is legal. But I believe we covered a very similar thing from T-Mobile a couple of weeks ago, and now Verizon is in the same boat. So basically, Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T all got in trouble for selling location data without clearly letting customers know they were doing that. They were largely selling this for advertising, but I'm sure probably for other reasons as well. Yeah, basically, courts have decided this isn't okay. And I know T-Mobile, if it was T-Mobile we covered last time, I don't know. I don't even understand their logic. They basically try to or T-Mobile lost and they tried to appeal and be like, well, we disagree with the ruling. And the court was like, that's not a good reason to appeal. So they kicked, the court upheld the ruling. And I think now Verizon's ruling has just come through, which is also like, yeah, no, this is not okay. You need to go get permissions. Little wins, and we'll take those little wins whenever we can get them in privacy. Okay, and this next one comes from 404 Media. It says airlines sell 5 billion plane ticket records to the government for warrantless searching. So we've covered a very similar story in the past about how it's the same company, Airlines Reporting Corporation, or ARC. And I guess this is also a pretty quick story because it's kind of just an update. It says the contract provides new insight into the scale of the sale of passenger data by ARC. And it says that the data includes information related to more than 270 carriers, sourced through more than 12,800 travel agencies. ARC has previously told the government not to reveal to the public where this passenger data came from, which includes people's names, full flight itineraries, and financial details. So it looks like, if I'm reading this article correctly, it looks like a lot of this data came from travel agents specifically, because there's a quote here that says, Americans' privacy rights shouldn't depend on whether they bought their tickets directly from the airline or via travel agency. ARC's sale of data to the U.S. government is yet another example of why Congress needs to close the data broker loophole. And that comes from Senator Ron Wyden, who I mentioned a minute ago. The government buys this data to bypass warrants, and we tried to close that and failed. And that's exactly what this is. The government is bypassing the requirement to go get a warrant, and instead they're going to ARC and purchasing all this data. For those who are just joining us, ARC is owned and operated by at least 8 major U.S. airlines. Publicly released documents show includes American Airlines, Delta, United, Southwest, Alaska Airlines, JetBlue, and European Airlines, Air France, and Lufthansa, and Air Canada. They act as a bridge between airlines and travel agencies, in which it helps with fraud prevention and finds trends in travel data. The new contract shows that ARC has access to much more data than previously reported. Earlier coverage found that it contained more than 1 billion records spanning 3 years of past and future travel. The new contract shows 5 billion ticketing records for searching capabilities. A wide range of government agencies have access to this data, such as ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, SEC, TSA, the State Department, U.S. Marshals, and the IRS. The FBI has asked ARC to search its databases for a specific person as part of a drug investigation. ATF has used it for investigating firearms trafficking. As with many things, this was established after September 11th. I feel like I've said this before, maybe not on the podcast, but I remember September 11th. I'm old enough to remember that. And that's not a flex. I'm just saying that I also remember a pre-September 11th world where you could walk all the way up to the airport, or to the plane, the little, what do they call it? The jetway that goes into the plane. You could walk all the way up to there without a ticket once upon a time. Anyone who's born after September 11th, that probably blew their mind. But it really is hard to overstate how much September 11th changed everything all over the world. The government is using this as a way to bypass the Fourth Amendment, to just buy the data and not have to go through any of the legal loopholes, and that's not okay. There are reasons that these checks and balances exist, and the government should stop viewing it. If it is legitimately causing some kind of issue, if there is some kind of world where these checks and balances are causing undue pressure, the solution is not to just find a loophole. The solution is to fix the law, to make it right. There's a reason there's checks and balances.
Okay, I also have a 404 story, and it's Michigan lawmakers who are attempting to ban porn entirely, and it's called the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act. Okay, so this bill is actually really bad because it doesn't just go after something that, we could spend hours debating whether or not it should be allowed. It goes after more things than that. So this would prohibit distribution of certain material on the internet that corrupts the public morals. This was introduced by 5 Republican representatives. You can find their names here if you're interested in that. And it would forbid, of course, that material. But to kind of get into this, of course, NSFW, they define this as content, digital, streamed, or authorized distributed on the internet. The primary purpose of which is to sexually arouse or gratify, including videos, erotica, magazines, stories, manga, material generated by artificial intelligence, live feeds, or sound clips. The less NSFW ones include ASMR, animated stuff, virtual stuff, depictions of characters, and anything else. They also define any depiction or description of trans people, period, I believe, just the existence of that, as pornographic, and therefore banned on platforms operating in the state, including anything that includes a disconnection between biology and gender by an individual of one biological sex, imitating, depicting, or representing himself or herself to be of another biological sex by means of attire, cosmetology, or prosthetics, etc. That is a whole discussion in itself. I just don't know, how does that even apply to like an actor? Like if I'm an actor and I like put on a wig, am I now breaking the law because I'm not, presenting myself as my gender? So I don't know. This just seems like a large overreach. To distribute any of this, it's a felony, up to 20 years, or a fine, or both, of $100,000. If the platform hosts more than 100 pieces of the above, that escalates to 25 years and $125,000. On top of being a felony, hosting that content would open platforms and internet service providers up to civil fines of up to $500,000 for each violation. Pretty excessive. Now, this is where it gets even more fun. It would require internet service providers servicing Michigan to implement mandatory filtering technologies and actively monitor and block known circumvention tools, which includes VPNs. So this would literally ban the promotion or sale of VPNs in Michigan. Let's see. Now, yes, we'll definitely cover our thoughts on Michigan. 404 does rightfully bring up that nearly 30 states now have passed and enacted laws that require all visitors on porn sites, including adults, to verify their ages with a government ID or a face scan. So from a privacy perspective, I think it's very clear that we are ultimately extremely against this, and this is extremely bad for privacy. In terms of my views on Michigan, this is bad, and I think that if there's ever been a more 1984 inspired law that we've seen come across our desks for this podcast over the several years we've been running this podcast, I think it's actually this one. Can you think of a single story that's more 1984 than this? Like it has everything. It's controlling things you can access on the internet, things that you can post to the internet. It's accessing, and it's trying to restrict it on an ISP level, a VPN level. It blocks and bans VPNs. It's pushing definitely a political agenda as part of it.
I should hope nobody can. It's I've heard on the news recently that things are actually hitting a point where, how do I put this delicately? Even certain conservative commentators, like very well-known conservative figures, are kind of condemning some of the things going on as like, okay, and what happens when a Democrat is in power and this is weaponized against me? So yeah, it's we're not doing very well right now, America, in terms of that stuff. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of tired of trying to not be political about it, but it's just, yeah, this is really bad. All right, this next one is kind of quick, and I saw it making the rounds, so I felt like this was an important one to at least mention. The headline says, Anthropic irks White House with limits on models use. Henry and I have very complicated opinions of AI here, so we're not here to say like, oh, good guy Anthropic. Basically, I'll quote the first paragraph. Anthropic is in the midst of a splashy media tour in Washington, but its refusal to allow its models to be used for some new law enforcement purposes has deepened hostility to the company inside the Trump administration. Anthropic recently declined requests by contractors working with federal law enforcement agencies because the company refuses to make an exception, allowing its AI tools to be used for some tasks, including surveillance of U.S. citizens, said the officials who spoke to Semaphore on the condition of anonymity. Let's see. For instance, Anthropic currently limits how the FBI, Secret Service, and Immigration and Customs... how the FBI, Secret Service, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement can use its AI models because those agencies conduct surveillance, which is prohibited by Anthropic's usage policy. So, yeah, one of the officials said that Anthropic's position, which has long been in effect, amounts to making a moral judgment about how law enforcement agencies do their jobs. So, yeah, I mean, I see their point. It says the policy doesn't specifically define what it means by domestic surveillance, and to be fair, the terms of service are always pretty vague and broad for that exact reason, so the company can decide when it does and doesn't want to obey them. But it's really interesting, in an industry, and not just AI for the record, but like in tech and arms and everything, in an industry that is like head over heels trying to get government contracts because they are very lucrative. It's really interesting to see the one company that's like, we're not going to play ball. So I don't know why they've decided to do that. I don't think they commented on this article. Oh yeah, no, Anthropic declined to comment. So yeah, I don't know why they decided to do that. If it's just like the founder's moral code and they're the ones steering the ship, like we talked about with Proton at the top, or if it's just I don't know, man. But it's certainly interesting. I really don't have an opinion on this one. I just think it's not something we normally see. And next up, this is just kind of a signal boost. This comes from EFF. It says, allies raise alarms about new mass surveillance laws and call, oh gosh, reader mode. Let me just disable that real quick. And call for international support. So the Mexican government passed a package of outrageously privacy-invasive laws in July that gives both civil and military law enforcement forces access to troves of personal data and forces every individual to turn over biometric information regardless of any suspicion of a crime. The laws create a new interconnected intelligence system dubbed the Central Intelligence Platform, under which intelligence and security agencies at all levels of government have the power to access from any public or private entity personal information for quote-unquote intelligence purposes, including license plate numbers, biometric information, telephone numbers, or telephone details that allow the identification of individuals, financial, banking, and health records, public and private property tax records, tax data, and more. The laws were ostensibly passed in the name of gathering intelligence to fight high-impact crime, because of course they always are. So the General Population Act forces every person in Mexico to enroll in a mandatory biometric ID system with fingerprints and a photo. Under the law, public and private entities are required to ask for the ID of any transaction or access to services such as banking, healthcare, education, and access to social programs. All data generated through the ID mandate will be fed into the new unique identity platform under the Disappeared Persons Act. Holy crap. Mexico, are you okay? Man. We just got done complaining about America and somehow it got worse. Good Lord. Yeah, okay, so that's a signal boost. In case you guys can't tell, I was overwhelmed with work the last 2 weeks. So like I took stories down, but I didn't take notes that I usually do. But yeah, so that's this is a signal boost. If you are Mexican, definitely pay attention to this. If you have family in Mexico, definitely, or, friends, family, just definitely spread this around.
Okay, this one, I'm going to TLDR this quite a bit. I was reading through it while Nate was covering the last stories. Essentially, Pakistan is spying on everybody inside the country through phone tapping, and now they have essentially a China-like firewall. They've even described this in the article as being like the second worst version of this outside of China. And so this has to do with a lot of weird political tension that you can surely read a little bit more about if you want to get caught up with that history, which has to do with politicians, media freedom, etc. But essentially, this is going to block access to tons of websites. They cite here 650,000 web links, which restricts YouTube, Facebook, and X. It hits tons of different people inside of the country. And there's actually two functions here. There's two systems. One lets intelligence agencies tap calls and texts, while the other slows or blocks websites and social media across the country. So it's essentially surveillance as well as censorship all under this new system that they have. So yeah, it's pretty much just letting you guys know about this. I know I wouldn't have really known anything about this if there wasn't some coverage about it. So if you didn't know this was happening, it's something good to know about and to educate yourself on and to see what this stuff can really look like and how it can happen in other countries. And we're seeing signs of this happening in other countries. And so it's really important to just be educated about this stuff.
All right, that'll bring us into the free and open source software news. And it's mostly good news this week. Pretty quick stuff. We'll start with Mullvad, who is introducing quick obfuscation for WireGuard. So this is something I believe we covered a couple years ago when it was first announced. I think Cloudflare announced it. And we've kind of just been waiting to see if it gets widely adopted or not. And it's pretty cool. It seems that Mullvad has adopted this. So Quick is aimed at helping users bypass firewalls and censorship. This is now available on all desktop platforms. Our Quick obfuscation tunnels WireGuard traffic, making it harder for firewalls to detect and block. Quick is a fast and lightweight transport protocol based on UDP. It is aimed at replacing the traditional use of TCP and HTTP2 and is being adopted rapidly as the web transitions to HTTP3. What we call quick obfuscation builds on the mask protocol described in RFC 9298, and if you're a technical person, you can read more of those details. As the title of the RFC implies, quick obfuscation works by tunneling UDP through an HTTP server, acting as a proxy. For a sensor looking at the traffic being sent between client and server, the traffic will appear as web traffic. HTTP is generally not blocked by state-level sensors since much of the internet would be unreachable without it. This update brings yet more resilience on top of the fast and secure WireGuard VPN protocol. And there's instructions in the article about how to enable that. Again, it is currently only on desktop. Let's see here. Android and iOS apps will include quick obfuscation in future releases. And they say that they would love to hear your feedback. So if you're a Mullvad user, definitely check that out. And the next one is also pretty quick. This comes from JMP Chat, who was a sponsor of ours at one point. They say Chiogram iOS Alpha. There's several things. This is like their newsletter. So there's eSIM nicknames, Chiogram Android updates, and Chiogram iOS Alpha. For those who don't know, JMP Chat is a voice over IP provider that works over XMPP. It's fully open source, I believe, very privacy respecting. What I like about it is it's cross-platform. They don't lock you into a single app. There's a lot of different apps you could use it. You can even use it on desktop, which is really cool. But as an Android user, I will say the Chiagram app on Android is incredible. It integrates very well with the Android OS. On iOS, up until now, you've had to use different, Chiagram wasn't available. The one they recommended was an app called Snicket, which, no offense to the developers, but in my opinion, it was very not user-friendly. It was a little bit convoluted to like send calls and kind of try to figure it out. Again, unlike Chiagram, I felt like Chiagram was extremely intuitive and integrated very well. So the exciting part of this for me, in my opinion, is that Chiagram is now coming to iOS. They say we're working on an experimental, and that is in bold and all caps for audio listeners, native client for iOS using Borogrove, which is previously called the Snicket SDK. It's available through test flight for the adventurous, and push notifications requires Snicket server running the dev version for now. Contact support if you're both interested in testing it and willing to provide feedback. So yeah, those are two big important caveats there. Obviously, it's experimental. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's as good as the Android version, but I really hope it is because I really enjoyed Chiagram. I thought it was very polished. Really cool stuff. Glad to see JMP is still going strong. Even though they are no longer a sponsor, we still do really support them. We really encourage them. If you're still looking for a voice over IP solution, definitely check them out because they're a great option.
I'm glad I got this. Okay, this one I'm pretty excited about. So Mastodon has rolled out quote posts with protections to prevent, I didn't know this was the phrase, dunking, which I guess is...
yeah, me either.
I don't know, commenting? Okay, so I'm going to keep this very short. There's a lot of context here. It's largely unnecessary. People know what quoting is if they've ever used microblogging platforms, most likely. The concept is if I make a post and I say, I think apples are wonderful, and then Nate says, oh my gosh, I just disagree, but I don't want to leave a comment. I also want to make a new post and reference this. Nate can quote the post, so it shows the post, and then Nate can leave his comment. Apples are bad for you and rotten, and Henry's dumb for this opinion. And then it'll show
Henry is
Nate's
dumb for his opinions.
Yes, exactly. Then that's how the quote works. Mastodon is rolling out quotes. So they've never done this before for weird reasons. But I love this change, and I've wanted quotes for the longest time. And so this is awesome, and I'm very happy to see this because this is a great way to showcase people and projects that you otherwise wouldn't. Like you don't want to just repost something. Like a good example of this, Firefox does something, Brave does something, and they post it on Mastodon. If I just tweet it, yes, but then I can't really tell people why I'm showcasing it. Like if Brave puts out a new feature, I can quote it and say, this is really cool, here's why, and I can give context for our specific audience. So that feature being lacking actually really sucked for Mastodon, and it's why I almost never repost anything on Mastodon, because normally when I'm reposting something, it's because I want to also add some context for all of you, because it's an educational platform. So yeah, I'm very happy to see this. I think this is awesome. I think this is a great move by Mastodon, and I am hyped. And if you have concerns about this, they do have all the controls that you would expect. Like you can change who can quote you, who can't quote you, and I will be leaving it on public. Anyone can quote because I think this is awesome. The next story is also Mastodon, and it's a new plan to make money, and it's hosting and support services for the open social web. So they are a nonprofit organization. They announced on Friday that they're going to offer paid hosting, moderation, and support services for orgs that want to join the open social web. I think this is actually really cool. I've been a big fan of these services recently because it means that I can still partake in a lot of these things without having to self-host and have access to top-tier security, top-tier reliability, etc. And that's essentially what they're offering for orgs that want to take advantage of that. So now organizations and entities could run their own servers, and this could all be just hosted simply by Mastodon. Customers can choose to run their own servers through this model, where Mastodon teams will manage the servers and optionally offer moderation services. So I think this is really cool. If there's any potential of me ever rolling out my own Mastodon server, it's going to be under some kind of thing like this, because I don't want to deal with the DIY and the moderation aspect of managing a Mastodon server. So this is super cool.
Our last FOSS story says Firefox DNS privacy faster than ever now on Android. So the blog post says, all web browsing starts with a DNS query to find the IP address for the desired service or website. For much of the internet's history, this query is sent in clear text. DNS over HTTPS or DOH plugs this privacy leak by encrypting DNS messages so that no one on the network, not even your internet service provider or a free public Wi-Fi provider, can eavesdrop on your browsing. In 2020, Firefox became the first browser to roll out DOH by default, starting in the US, and in 2023, we announced DOH by default in Canada. This year, we built on that foundation and delivered major performance improvements in mobile support, blah, blah, blah. After bringing encrypted DNS protection to millions of desktop users, we're now extending the same to mobile. Users who have been waiting on DOH on Android can now turn it on and browse with the same protections as their desktop. So yeah, this is starting with this week's release of Firefox 143 for Android. Performance testing is currently underway. If DOH is as fast as we expect, we plan to enable it by default for Android users in certain regions, similar to desktop. Until then, you can opt in early if you'd like. And there's a little screenshot here that video viewers can see. And yeah, it's just like desktop. It says DNS over HTTPS, and there's default protection, increased protection, max protection, or off. Last but not least, we have one final story. This comes from the Misfits section because I wasn't really sure where else it made sense. It says Executive Director Cindy Cohn will step down after 25 years with EFF. Yeah, I mean, the headline really says it all. For those who don't know, Cindy Cohn is the reason that we have a modern internet. We've briefly mentioned this before in the past. Once upon a time, the government tried to ban PGP, which is what ProtonMail is based on. It's what Toot is based on, like a modified version of PGP. Most encrypted email is based on PGP, and you can also use it yourself with any other email provider like Gmail or Yahoo. I don't know why you would, but you can. And the government tried to regulate that the same way they would regulate a weapon. And so Cindy Cohn, I believe, was the leader of this legal team, but I could be wrong. She was definitely on the team. Her and a bunch of other lawyers got involved with Phil Zimmerman and a guy named Daniel Bernstein. And they all got together and they sued the government and they said code is speech. You cannot regulate code in the same way that you would regulate munitions. And they won. And that is why we say things like you can't ban TikTok. You can't ban VPNs. Like, there is legal precedent for this stuff. I really think she's one of the foundational people we have to thank for all the good parts of the internet that we have today in that sense of security and privacy. So she's a super rock star in my opinion. I'm a little bit sad to see her step down. I think she's been doing great things at EFF. But according to her, she says she never really wanted to be in a management position, which is fair. I can understand that. She's really much more interested in being in the trenches and actively doing part of the work. And when you're running an organization like EFF, you don't really get to do that a lot. You're busy managing the day-to-day. You're taking press calls. You're worried about where's the organization headed, growth, hiring, all these different things that keep her out of the frontline work. So she's not retiring or anything. She still really wants to keep being part of the privacy fight. And again, I think that's probably a good thing because apparently she's really good at it. And we will see who takes over after she has stepped down. I don't think they've announced who's going to take. I think they have like an interim person taking over. Yeah, the board of directors has assembled a search committee, which in turn engaged a leadership advisory firm to conduct a search for EFF's new executive director. So that's where we're at. EFF's going to have new leadership. Cindy Cohn's going to move on to other things. And yeah, EFF is a huge part of the privacy world. So I just felt like that was a really important update to keep you guys updated on, or a really important development to keep you guys updated on. All right, so that was it for the last couple weeks. As usual, we missed a week, so it's kind of a long week. Apologies, everyone. I usually do the editing, and like I said, we tried something new this week. If you guys liked it, it should make editing a lot faster. And also, my schedule should be slowing down, not this coming week, but the week after, so hopefully things will get more back to normal. But in the meantime, we talked about Proton potentially suspending journalist accounts, hacktivist accounts, kind of a gray area. Just, be aware of the limitations of these services, know the threat models, know the use cases, and know what you're getting into when you use them. Plex had a data breach. That's a very popular service in our community, so we wanted to keep you guys updated on that. Leadership changes at EFF, lots of good FOSS news, and much, much more. And now I will let Henry tell you about our sponsor.
Yeah, so our sponsor actually directly asked us to make this as fast as you can to mimic how fast our service is. And EasyOptOuts, a TLDR, get your data off of people searching websites, easy as possible, minimal information. It's extremely cheap. There is no cheaper service that I've been able to find out there that's as effective. They are research-backed. Nate and I both use them. There is currently still no better option we can even find. And it's just kind of a no-brainer if you guys are trying to do anything against these people searching websites. They are the best data removal service, and I will die on that hill. Check them out down in the description. And back to Nate for the final outro.
Thank you guys for listening to Surveillance Report. Links to all the stories can be found in the show notes if you want to follow up with any of them or share them around. If you have a story that you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing we want to ask of you is to please share the podcast around. Make sure you are subscribed. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with privacy, and you can help us do that. So thank you again for listening, and we will hopefully be back next week with more news.